9 scientists at the EPA signed a memo saying children were being exposed to this pesticide at levels more than 140 times what the agency considered safe. That memo was written in 2016. The pesticide is still legal on apples in 19 American states. In 1936, a German chemist was trying to build a pesticide. He accidentally built the world's first nerve agent instead, the forerunner of sarin. The mechanism he found disables the enzyme your nervous system uses to stop firing. Signals pile up. Muscles cannot reset. That same mechanism, that same enzyme target, is the active principle of the chemical Dow Chemical, patented in 1966 and registered for use on American food in 1965. You knew it as Ray. Your exterminator called it Dursban. Apple growers in Washington state ordered it as Lorsban. In May of 2025, the nations of the world voted to list it under the Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants, the same treaty that covers DDT. 19 American states have not changed their position. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what the research found, who reviewed it, and what you can do right now using a specific federal legal standard to keep this chemical off the food your family eats. You will understand why a parent company that stopped making this pesticide entirely in 2020 spent years making sure no one who came after them would have to stop using it either. In January 2017, the company's CEO donated $1 million to underwrite a presidential inauguration. 20 days after a meeting between that CEO and the new EPA administrator, the agency reversed its proposed ban on the pesticide. The ban had been built on a memo signed by 9 of the agency's own scientists. Your nervous system communicates through a molecule called acetylcholine. Every time a nerve fires, acetylcholine crosses the gap between cells and triggers a response. Then an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase breaks it down, clearing the signal so the nerve can reset. This system is your body's on-off switch for every voluntary and involuntary function you control. Chlorpyrifos, once inside the body, is converted into a compound that binds irreversibly to that enzyme, not temporarily. The enzyme does not recover at that binding site. Your body must build new enzyme from scratch. In adults, measurable symptoms appear when more than 70% of the enzyme is inhibited. That threshold, inhibition in healthy adults, was what regulators used for decades to set the legal residue limits on food. But a fetal brain is not a developed brain with a smaller body attached. It is a brain in the process of being built, using a chemical blueprint that organophosphate exposure disrupts at the molecular level. The damage occurs at exposures far below the threshold that produces any detectable enzyme inhibition in an adult. This distinction between what harms an adult and what harms a developing child was the central scientific dispute in every regulatory battle that followed. In 2006, Columbia University researchers published findings from a study that had been running since 1997. They had measured chlorpyrifos levels directly in the umbilical cord blood of 254 newborns in New York City. Children born with high exposure levels scored 6.5 points lower on motor development tests at age 3 and 3.5 points lower on mental development tests compared to children with low levels. They were significantly more likely to show attention problems, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder symptoms, and pervasive developmental disorder problems at 3 years of age. The same children were assessed again at age 7 using the Wechsler Intelligence Scale, one of the most validated IQ assessments in clinical use. For every standard deviation increase in prenatal chlorpyrifos exposure, full-scale IQ declined by 1.5%. Working memory, The cognitive function most essential to learning was the most strongly affected index. Researchers then scanned the children's brains using magnetic resonance imaging. What they found were structural abnormalities, measurable changes in the physical architecture of the brain itself. Regions of abnormal enlargement and indentation across the cortical surface, corresponding in 3 of 4 brain regions to lower IQ scores in the exposed children. Separately, UC Berkeley researchers followed 601 pregnant farm worker women in California's Salinas Valley from 1999 through their children's school years. The findings were identical. 2 independent institutions, 2 different populations, one urban, one rural. One set of mothers in New York City apartments, another in agricultural labor housing in the Central Valley. The same conclusion. The effect was strongest in children of mothers with lower natural levels of a detoxifying enzyme that breaks down organophosphates. Some children are genetically more vulnerable than others. None of them chose the exposure. The European Food Safety Authority reviewed this evidence in 2019. Their conclusion: no safe exposure level could be determined for chlorpyrifos. The approval criteria for human health are not met. There is no dose at which regulators can state it is safe for children. That is not a precautionary position. That is a scientific finding. In October 2015, the Obama administration began the formal process to ban chlorpyrifos from food crops. The proposed rule was built on the EPA's own risk assessment, which for the first time used neurodevelopmental harm, not just enzyme inhibition in healthy adults, as the standard. 9 EPA scientists signed that assessment. The United Kingdom banned chlorpyrifos in April 2016. California began its process the same year. In January 2017, Scott Pruitt was appointed to lead the EPA. On March 9, 2017, Pruitt's official schedule showed a meeting with Dow Chemical CEO Andrew Liveris at an industry conference in Houston. Liveris had donated $1 million to fund the presidential inauguration 6 weeks earlier. He was simultaneously serving as chairman of the President's American Manufacturing Council when an executive order was signed creating agency task forces to select regulations for elimination. Liveris stood directly behind the president at the signing ceremony. The president handed him the pen. After the Associated Press reported on the Houston meeting, an EPA spokeswoman said it had never happened. A brief introduction in passing at a conference hallway, she said. They had not discussed chlorpyrifos. 11 days after the conference, Pruitt's scheduler sent an email to Liveris's executive assistant. The email, obtained through a public records lawsuit filed by the Sierra Club, read, "I am reaching out today about setting up a meeting to continue the discussion between Dow Chemical and Administrator Scott Pruitt." On March 29, 2017, 20 days after Houston, Pruitt announced the EPA would not ban chlorpyrifos. The science, he said, was inconclusive and flawed. The 9 scientists who had signed the risk assessment were still employed at the agency. Dow Chemical had spent $5.2 million on federal lobbying in the first quarter of 2017 alone, the quarter of the reversal. Their lobbyists had met in the preceding quarter with members of the Senate, the House, the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, State, and Treasury, the EPA, the White House, and the Office of the United States Trade Representative. Chlorpyrifos was listed by name in those disclosures. The Ninth United States Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in 2018 that Pruitt had violated federal law by ignoring the conclusions of agency scientists. The EPA appealed. In January 2020, the European Union banned chlorpyrifos entirely. Residue limits were set to 0.01 milligrams per kilogram, the threshold of laboratory detection, not reduced, eliminated to the vanishing point. Biden's EPA finally issued the ban in August 2021. 16 months later, the 8th United States Circuit Court of Appeals vacated it. The case had been brought by 20 agricultural trade associations and a generic pesticide manufacturer based in India. All chlorpyrifos tolerances were automatically reinstated on December 28, 2023. A proposed rule to re-ban most uses was issued in December 2024. A new administration took office in January 2025 and froze pending regulations. As of this recording, no final rule has been issued. In May 2025, Chlorpyrifos was listed under the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, the treaty that previously listed DDT and polychlorinated biphenyls for global elimination. The petition asking the EPA to revoke all chlorpyrifos tolerances was filed by the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Pesticide Action Network in September 2007. In November 2025, Earth Justice sued the EPA for failing to respond to it. That petition is now 18 years old. Who decided that was acceptable? The pesticide has no color, no taste detectable at residue levels, no visual trace on the fruit. The United States does not require any label indicating that produce was treated with it. There is no designation at the supermarket, no tier on the price tag, no marking at the bin. The only way to know whether the apple in your hand came from an orchard in Washington State, the top apple-producing state in the country, included on the list of states where application remains legal that was treated with chlorpyrifos, is to know which specific orchard it came from, what that orchard's pest management program uses, and when the most recent application was made. That information is not available to you at the point of purchase. Biomonitoring data from the Centers for Disease Control found organophosphate metabolites, the compounds the body produces when it processes this class of pesticide, in the urine of more than 75% of the American adults tested. The organophosphate class includes chlorpyrifos. There is no mandatory testing of apple crops for chlorpyrifos residue before they reach store shelves. There is no required disclosure. There is no mechanism by which a parent pushing a cart through a grocery store in Ohio or Virginia or Washington State can determine whether the bag of apples they are buying was treated with a compound that 9 federal scientists concluded was reaching children at 140 times the safe level. That is not an accident of regulatory complexity. The complexity is the mechanism. It was Easter afternoon in the Wenatchee Valley in central Washington state. Children were outside hunting eggs in the yard. The yard sat feet from an apple orchard. The family had gone out for lunch and come home to find the orchard had been sprayed while they were away. The smell came first. One family member would later describe it as plasticky, like rotten eggs. The stomach aches came next, then vomiting, difficulty breathing, diarrhea, scratchy throats. Every member of the family went to the doctor. The Washington State Department of Agriculture investigated and found evidence that chlorpyrifos had drifted from the neighboring orchard onto the family's property. Applied, according to the label. Moved by wind, the father bought the adjacent orchard a year and a half later and converted it to organic production. In California's San Joaquin Valley, a woman named Claudia Angulo remembered watching a group of pregnant farm workers get drenched by a crop-dusting plane when she was a teenager. All of them lost their pregnancies. Years later, when her son Isaac was born, blood tests revealed he carried the highest measured levels of chlorpyrifos ever documented in a child. Isaac was diagnosed with an intellectual disability and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Claudia filed a legal declaration in the federal lawsuit that ultimately forced the EPA to issue the 2021 ban. In Minnesota, A woman named Bonnie Wirtz had Chlorpyrifos drift from a field into her rural home. Her son was diagnosed with a neurodevelopmental disorder. She filed a declaration in the same lawsuit. The lawsuit won. The court ordered the ban. The ban was implemented. Then it was vacated. The enzyme does not pause for a comment period. Five states have enacted independent bans: California, Hawaii, New York, Oregon, and Maryland. Produce grown within those states cannot legally be treated with chlorpyrifos. If you live there, your state's enforcement, not the federal government's, is what currently applies. For everyone else, the most direct legal protection available is the USDA National Organic Program. Under federal law, certified organic produce cannot be treated with synthetic pesticides, including chlorpyrifos. The certification is administered under Title VII of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 205. It is an enforcement regime with inspections, paper trails, and financial penalties for violations. It is not a marketing designation. It is the only federally enforceable mechanism currently standing between this pesticide and the food it reaches. It is not a guarantee of zero residue from neighboring field drift. Documented studies show atmospheric transport of chlorpyrifos to areas where it was never applied, including regions of Sweden where it was never authorized. But it removes the direct application. For produce grown in fields where chlorpyrifos is applied, that is the entire exposure pathway. The Environmental Working Group publishes an annual shopper's guide to pesticides in produce, drawn from USDA pesticide residue testing data. Apples have appeared on their highest residue list in multiple years. That guide is free and searchable by produce item. At a farmer's market, the question is direct. Do you use chlorpyrifos or other organophosphate insecticides? Many small-scale growers who have not pursued organic certification have nonetheless chosen alternatives, not because the law requires it, but because they farm land adjacent to where their families live. The Washington State apple grower who converted his orchard to organic production after his family was sickened on an Easter afternoon made that calculation personally. He did not wait for a federal rule. The Earth Justice lawsuit filed in November 2025 is asking a federal court to force the EPA to finally answer the 18-year-old petition. The outcome of that case will determine whether a final ban is possible under the current administration or whether the regulatory review expected in 2026 becomes the next mechanism for delay. You now have the information the petition contains. You know what the 9 scientists signed. You know what the Columbia researchers measured in umbilical cord blood. You know which states have acted and which have not. 18 years of regulatory silence is not an oversight. It is a choice made by an apparatus that knew what it was choosing and chose it anyway. If this opens something for you, if you can picture yourself asking a farmer's market vendor the one question the supermarket never gives you the chance to ask, subscribe so you do not miss the next system we uncover. Share this with someone who is buying apples for their children and has never been given a reason to ask where they came from.